the main, and the only issue, which all tennis players endlessly grapple with, from the very first moment they pick up the tennis racket, is how they could make the tennis ball do what they'd like it to do. To attain this control, one should really study the ball and try to learn as much as it's possible about ball's behavior under different circumstances. Not to take someone's word for it, but to see it with their own two eyes. Because managing the ball is difficult enough as it is, without complicating the matter any further by relying on some ludicrous and ignorant assumptions which have no basis in physical reality. So, in this simple experiment, all the people who were questioned prior to conducting it were absolutely sure and predicted that the ball, which is fired at 40 miles per hour into a tennis racket, which is standing upright on the butt of its handle, unsupported and unrestrained in any way, will simply knock it over and will keep on going in its original direction. Oh boy, were they all wrong. As you can see for yourself, the ball is deflected, and it is going back to where it came from, at a rather surprising rate of speed. Based on the obvious and undeniable results of such basic experiment, very far-reaching and very useful conclusions could be drawn. Some of them are very much concerning the volleys. First, in order to send the ball back over the net, the racket does not have to be actively striking the ball. It can be simply placed in the path of the ball, and the ball will be comfortably deflected back. Second, the racket doesn't even have to be held in the player's hand. It can literally be left unattended, or be simply tossed into the ball's path, and still, the ball will be deflected. And third, the direction and the trajectory of the deflected balls will depend only on the angle at which the string surface of the racket is positioned in relation to the incoming ball. All of it obviously contradicts the official, unsubstantiated tennis dogma, which stubbornly prescribes that in order to volley successfully, the ball has to be actively struck, that the player should always step forward toward the ball, firm up the wrist, and punch the incoming ball, guiding his racket in the direction of the target. But at the same time, it would explain how the masters of the volley are getting it done. What they do begins to make sense. They never go after the incoming ball or aggressively rush toward it. As a rule, they simply step sideways and deflect the ball back by placing the racket in its path and directing it by varying the angle of the racket's face. A chop-like action which these players perform is mistaken for a forward ball punching action. It is not. This movement is not at all about punching the ball. What it does, it stabilizes and reinforces the racket while taking advantage of the basic physical phenomenon, which will have to be explained. If you look closely, you will see that this action is not at all directed toward the target, but it moves the racket down, almost vertically, past the ball, in a glancing fashion. These chopping actions are not there to direct the ball. They simply create the kinetic momentum, which in turn helps to stabilize and solidify the racket as a deflective surface. Similarly, a man on a bicycle who is not in motion can be easily toppled by a very light push. But the same man on the same bicycle, moving at 15 miles per hour, cannot. He becomes almost as solid as a wall the momentum simply changes everything. As we have seen, the racket, which is left completely unattended and stationary, is capable by itself to deflect the ball at almost half of its incoming speed. But the racket, which in the hand of a player is reinforced by the mass of the arm and the kinetic momentum on top of it, becomes a much stiffer and more formidable deflection surface, and can send the ball back with a hell of a lot higher velocity. The skill of simple deflection, like any other skill, has to be developed. And like any other skill, it improves only with practice. Without well-developed deflection skill, the volley will always remain an unreliable hit-or-miss proposition.